Things weren't looking good for the little girl. After she rushed home, she found her house in flames. She looked for her parents everywhere and she couldn't find them anywhere. And then these two men on horses, they came and they grabbed her and they tied her up, tied her behind the horses. And she said, "Where's my mummy? Where's my daddy?" They wouldn't tell her. And they dragged her. And she was following these horses and walking for hours and hours. She kept asking about her parents, but they wouldn't tell her where her parents were. She looked back and just saw the smouldering ruins of a house. And she walked, and she walked, and she walked for hours and hours and a day and more. And finally, they left her country and came to this other country. It was much greener than her own country. There was much more life there, many more flowers, the grass was greener, the rivers were bigger. It was a beautiful country, but she didn't know where her mum and dad were. And then they brought her to this big house. And at the big house, they introduced her to this woman. She was dressed in fine clothes and she thought, "I'm never going to see my mummy and daddy again." And she started crying. Sad. But this lady dressed in fine clothes took her. She gave her a hug. She said, "You're here to help me. It's okay. I will look after you." And so she started doing things around the house. She would clean the beautiful stone floors. She would have to take this horrible big bucket out every morning. The bucket was filled with their poo and their wee from the previous night. She'd dig a hole in the backyard and she'd put it in and then she'd cover it up again. And then she would have to help the husband of the house. He was the one that shot the arrow that killed the king. He was the one that was now in charge of all the king's armies, and week after week he would go out to battle and he would fight for the king and he would always win. He was such an amazing warrior, but every time he'd come back, he'd have cuts and gashes on him and he wouldn't even know it. She would actually sew these cuts up and he wouldn't even feel it. She realized that this man had a horrible, horrible disease. She went up to Naaman's wife and said, "Your husband, he's got this horrible disease, hasn't he?" And his wife just looked up. She was crying and she was sad. And she said, "Yes, and I just don't know." And the slave girl said, "Look, if only he would go to my home country. There's a prophet there, and this prophet could heal him." She said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes." So Naaman, trusting the little girl, because she'd worked so well around the house, went to the king, and the king said, "Okay, if you really want to go, you can go." And so Naaman, he got a couple of horses, he got a big wagon behind them. He filled the wagon with silver and gold and fine cloth. And he started heading out of his country, going to the country where this man was. He went for a couple of days, and then just before he got to the country, he was going to camp by this river. And as he started setting up the camp, he looked up in front of him, and there was a whole heap of soldiers. They'd actually deserted from his army. And they came marching towards Naaman, their spears out, their swords out, horses running in the background. And they looked at Naaman and they said, "Naaman, you're not going to go anywhere with that money. We're going to take it."